So about 1 or 2 weeks ago, I dropped a video about Rose from the Titanic and why she's absolutely terrible. And then someone in the comments was like, why are you only going in on Rose and not Jack, because this is coming off very sexist. So I was like, fine, let me drop a video on Jack because Jack is not as innocent as we remember him to be. Alright, so the first time we see Jack is about 20 minutes into the movie. Now, the thing is, the Titanic was said to leave around noon. And this detail is very important because it means that Jack was in a bar in the morning. Now, that's already a little bit sketchy in my opinion, but let's move on. So we see Jack and his friend Fabrizio playing poker, and we immediately find out that Jack is playing for 2 tickets to board the Titanic. So this is a high stakes game. Whoever wins gets to board the Titanic, and whoever loses stays in Southampton, England. So as Jack is playing the game, Fabrizio, his friend, goes, "Yo, I can't believe you bet our entire life savings on this game. You better win."
Jack, you are Pat, so you bet everything we have.
So then Jack looks at his boy with a very intense look in his eye and goes, "When you got nothing, you've got nothing to lose."
When you got nothing to lose.
And Fabrizio is just sitting there like, this guy better win or we're screwed. So from the first few moments of seeing Jack, we already know that he's broke. He's also in a bar in the morning, and he's gambling his whole life savings for Titanic tickets. So what this tells me is that Jack does not come across as someone who has his life together. He comes across as a risk taker, someone who lives in the moment and is not thinking too far ahead.
You only live once, that's the motto, nigga. YOLO, and we bout it every day.
Okay, so cool. Jack wins the game of poker. They then find out they only have about 5 minutes to get onto the ship.
No, mate. Titanic go to America in 5 minutes.
Proving once again that Jack is not someone who plans ahead. And then we see Jack and Fabrizio rush through a crowd of people. They're excited, their energy is pulsating through the air, and then they eventually get to the front door in the nick of time. Okay, so they get to the door, there's a man standing there checking boarding passes, and he goes, "Did you guys go through the health inspection, because that's mandatory if you want to board this ship?" And then Jack goes, "Of course we did." You don't have to worry about that because we don't have lice. Also, we're American. And then the guy at the door is like, "Okay, that's all I need to know." And he lets them onto the ship without checking that they got any health inspections. So at this point, we know that Jack is in a bar in the morning. He's a gambler. He doesn't plan ahead, and that's why they got to the Titanic just in the nick of time. And also, he's a liar, one who put everybody's life at risk by not getting a health inspection. So after this, we see Jack and Fabrizio find their accommodation. They get into their room, which they're sharing with 2 other people. And once they get there, the guys in the room are like, "Who the fuck is this?" And that's because they were expecting to see the people that Jack won the tickets from. After that, we see Jack and his friend Fabrizio standing at the front of the ship. You can tell that they're very excited to be there. And that's when Jack goes, "I'm the king of the world. I'm the king of the world." At this point, you can tell that Jack loves adventure, and despite being broke, he seems to love his life. So after this, Jack sits down on a chair with his boys, and as they're talking, it's almost like he goes into a trance. And they're like, "What the hell is he looking at?" They all look up, and that's when they realize that Jack is staring intensely at a woman that is way above his level, right? Because as Jack is sitting there in his raggedy clothes and chilling with his third-class friends, the lady he's looking at looks like she's drenched in royalty, right? Her hair looks like it was done by a hairstylist. Her clothes look like they cost a fortune. And to top it off, she's extremely beautiful. So then one of the very supportive guys that's sitting with Jack goes, "Forget it, you don't have a chance with her, brokey."
Oh, forget it, Boyle. You just like have angels fly out of your arses get next to the likes of her.
However, Jack is so captivated by this woman, I don't think he heard a word that guy said. He probably heard, "Wah, wah, 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 wah." So Jack is staring at this woman. She then glances at him because she knows that he's staring. And then out of nowhere, a man that looks like he's dripped in wealth walks out and tries to talk to Rose. They then have a mini argument, and then Rose storms off while leaving the man looking defeated. So at this point, Jack is probably thinking, okay, that's probably her man, but it looks like they're not getting along. Okay, so the next time we see Jack, it's nighttime. He's laying on a bench. when all of a sudden he sees the very same woman he was staring at rush to the back of the ship in turmoil. And then she gets on the railing like she's about to jump off. And this is the part that shows that despite being poor, Jack is incredibly smart. He begins talking about his life in order to calm her down, distracting her from her crazy thoughts. And then he says something that makes her feel like she's responsible for him. Jack goes, "Hey, if you're gonna jump, I'm gonna jump as well."
You let go and I'm gonna have to jump in there after you.
And maybe I just don't have faith in humanity, but if Rose decided to jump, I think Jack was gonna go, "Well, I tried," right? Because at that point they were all alone. And if Rose decided to jump, nobody but Jack was going to see it. Okay, so Rose doesn't jump. Jack then rescues her as she slips and nearly falls into the water. Then crew members of the ship find them in a very compromising position and they assume that he's about to rob her or something. And that's when Cal and his bodyguard arrive, right? And as they arrive, you can tell Cal's probably thinking, "Who the hell is this peasant?" Ugh. But he goes, "Rose, what happened? Are you okay?" And then Rose says something like, "Oh, I must have tripped as I was leaning over to see the propellers."
I was leaning over and I slipped.
So it's around this time that Jack and Rose learn each other's names. Cal then takes Rose off to their luxurious suite. And then Cal's bodyguard looks at Jack and goes, "It's funny how all of this happened so suddenly and you had time to take off your shoes and your jacket."
And you still had time to remove your jacket and your shoes.
And that was his way of saying, "I don't believe you, bitch." So at this point, it's bad enough that Cal knows that Jack is from the 3rd level, but he also thinks Jack is a liar as well, right? Because I'm sure his bodyguard was like, that guy, don't trust him. Okay, so cool. The next time we see Jack and Rose together, they're walking around the deck, Jack is talking, and that's when we finally get to know a little bit more about Jack's backstory. We learn that Jack has been alone since he was around 15 or 16 years old, after his parents passed away, and then he describes his existence and life as a tumbleweed blowing in the wind.
You could just call me a tumbleweed blowing in the wind.
And that essentially means that he's the kind of guy that goes with the flow, has no real plan, and has no stability. We then see Rose show Jack her engagement ring, and Jack is like, "Oh, okay, that's nice."
God, look at that thing.
And you can tell that Jack doesn't give a damn about the fact that she's about to be married. Okay, so shortly after this, in this same scene, we find out a little bit more about Jack. Rose grabs Jack's notebook from him, starts flipping through the pages, and within seconds you can tell that Rose is very impressed by Jack's drawings. She then flips through a couple more pages, and then she stumbles upon a drawing of a naked woman that Jack drew. Right? And that should have been a red flag. But then Jack goes on to say something ludicrous. He goes, "Well, the good thing about Paris is there's a lot of women willing to take their clothes off." Right?
Well, that's one of the good things about Paris. Lots of girls willing to take their clothes off.
Now this should have been a sign that this guy kind of gets around. But then Rose looks at the drawing and goes, "Oh, so were you guys intimate or something? Who is this same naked woman that you keep drawing?" So then Jack just casually goes, "Oh, that's just a one-legged prostitute. It's not that serious."
She was a one-legged prostitute.
But then he specifically tells Rose that nothing happened between them. But at the same time, you gotta be like, was Jack telling the truth? And if he was telling the truth, how does one end up in the company of prostitutes to begin with? Were you visiting a brothel? Like, were you working at a brothel? Right? What kind of company do you keep? Okay, so cool. So Jack and Rose keep talking. Rose inadvertently lets Jack know that she feels stuck in her life. And then Jack goes, "Why don't I teach you how to spit? That should be fun." And then Jack and Rose end up taking turns spitting off the Titanic.
Oh, that was better. You gotta work on it.
Now this should have been a good moment because we know that Rose feels trapped, and doing something as absurd as this makes it feel like life is in her control. But then her mom walks up at that exact moment, finds her spitting off the Titanic with Jack, and you can tell she's thinking, "Look at what this 3rd-class peasant is making my daughter do." And Jack is just standing there, spit dripping down his face, and he looks like he just got caught stealing cookies out of a cookie jar. So after this, Rose heads off to prepare for dinner. Jack borrows a suit from Molly, and then the infamous dinner scene happens. Cool, so Jack shows up for the dinner, and I'm not gonna lie, he looks really polished. Even Cal, who seems somewhat impressed but still condescending, says something like, "Oh, look at this guy. He almost looks like a gentleman."
Well, it's amazing. You
could almost pass for a gentleman.
So the dinner scene happens, and you can tell that everybody thought that Jack was going to look like a fool the entire time, but he held his own.
I mean, I love waking up in the morning not knowing what's gonna happen or...
Well said, Jack.
Here.
Then after dinner ends, Cal and his buddies go and smoke and drink up, and then Jack hands Rose, the woman that's supposed to be engaged, a note that says, "Meet me at the clock." Now, this is where Jack's pursuit of Rose increases tenfold. At first, it seemed like they were just flirting, having conversations, but now you can tell that despite being engaged, despite being invited to dinner by her fiancé and eating his food, he's really into Rose. Now, I know this looks romantic on a film, and I remember watching this scene as a kid thinking, oh, that's so cute. He really likes her. But this is the type of thing that, if it happened in real life, somebody's gonna get beat down or even unalived. Okay, so after this, Rose meets Jack at the clock, and he's like, let me show you what a real party is about. And then they go down to the third level and have the time of their lives. They're dancing, drinking, and you can tell Rose hasn't had this much fun in a very long time. But then she gets spotted by Cal's bodyguard. Cal then reprimands her the next day, and she was probably thinking, maybe I need to stay away from Jack. But then Jack steals a coat, right? Because Jack is now a gambler, liar, adulterer, homeless, broke. What else we got? So Jack steals the coat in order to look like he's from the first class. He then pulls Rose into the gym, and then he essentially tells her, look, I likes you and I wants you. But Rose goes, no, Jack, I'm engaged. I can't do it. And Jack's like, I know this is crazy. I only have about $10 to my name, but I really want to be with you, right?
I've got $10 in my pocket. I have nothing to offer you.
So when this scene ends, it looks like Rose is not going to give in. It looks like Rose is going to stay with Cal, but then she finds Jack at the front of the ship. She goes, I choose you, Jack. And then Jack and Rose have that iconic Titanic moment where Rose feels like she's flying, and it's in this moment where Jack wins over Rose, the woman that's engaged. So Jack goes back to Rose's accommodation. He sees the diamond. Rose then goes, I want you to draw me, Jack. And then Jack ends up drawing Rose while she's naked. So after this scene, Cal's bodyguard gets to the room. He notices that somebody was there. He then sees Jack and Rose and then chases them throughout the ship. Eventually, Jack and Rose end up losing him. They end up in the storage level of the ship. And that's when Jack ends up sealing the deal by having intimate relations with an engaged woman. And like I said, as a kid, I was like, yo, this is so romantic. Oh. But now that I'm older, I think what should have happened before this scene is that Rose should have gone up to Cal and said, look, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm in love with Jack and I want to be with him. And then this scene should have taken place. Yes, I know Rose was trapped and yada yada, but it still makes her look like a cheater, and it makes Jack look like a homewrecker. Okay, so cool, Jack and Rose end up doing the deed. They then end up at the top of the ship once again. They begin making out, and because the two scouts at the top of the ship were looking at Rose and Jack make out, they don't see the iceberg that's approaching, and as a result, the Titanic hits the iceberg. Right, and this means that Rose and Jack were essentially the reason why the Titanic hit the iceberg. Now here's the last thing we can critique about Jack, right? After the Titanic hits the iceberg, Rose is like, I need to warn my mom and Cal about this.
We should tell Mother and Cal.
So Jack and Rose show up hand in hand, and Jack is just standing there like, I got your girl. I got your girl.
That's why I fucked your fat mother.
Right, and at this point he was lucky that Cal was somewhat composed in nature, somewhat, because he does flip out later, but the fact that Jack showed up like that with Rose was hubris. And if it happened in real life, Jack would have gotten beaten down, or even worse, he would have been unalived. So after this, Cal frames Jack for stealing the diamond. The Titanic is sinking, so Rose and Cal get to a lifeboat, and then Rose has an epiphany, realizes that Cal planted the diamond on Jack, and then goes to save him.
Rose! Jack! Rose, I'm in here!
Now at this point, it's really hard to critique Jack because everything he does after this is very selfless. He tries to get Rose off the sinking Titanic, but then she jumps back on. He rescues her from Cal, who at this point is extremely jealous and is trying to unalive them. Then they somehow escape that situation, end up back on the top of the ship, sink with the Titanic, end up on the door that's big enough for the both of them, and then Jack sacrifices himself to save his woman. You know, the one that he met 3 days ago. Oh, and before Jack actually dies, Rose is like, "I love you, Jack. I love you."
I love you, Jack.
But in that moment, Jack doesn't say "I love you" back. And I don't think he ever says it once throughout the movie. So, despite being a gambler, liar, possible brothel enthusiast, a thief, a homeless broke man who has no idea how he's gonna take care of Rose, and also an adulterer, Jack risked it all for Rose, and in doing so, he lost his life. That's essentially it, man. Jack seemed like a good guy, and you can tell that he truly is from the bottom of his heart, but he has his faults. That's all I'm saying. That's it for the video. If you want me to cover someone else, maybe from another movie or something, let me know down below. Also, if you haven't done so already, have a look at my Rose Sucks video, because this video is a continuation of that one. Anyway, catch you in the next one.